And I
Your
think
thumbnail.
what I do? Did I spell it wrong?
The thumbnail with Anne.
Oh yeah. Some of my finest work. Listen, I think one of the best creative decisions I ever made is making my thumbnails look like they were written by a 5-year-old, because what it does is anyone
Or
joining
a serial killer.
Okay, maybe it's a 5-year-old serial killer. I don't know. For anybody joining, they're gonna their expectations are gonna be on the floor. So I can only we can only collectively go up from here.
I see. I appreciate the logic. I get it. I like it.
Thank you. I really thought it through. I didn't really think it through. It was like when I was first putting together the thumbnail for it, I was like, I don't want to use the same superheroine spotlight one. Because if you remember, I have folder TV cups, some really nice, stuff to use for superheroine spotlight. And frankly, I think I was using a screenshot. It wasn't even QES version. I did not maximize the good quality stuff that they, so kindly had edited for me, but it looked really nice. And I was like, I just feel like it might be setting the bar a little high, and maybe we just need to drop it all the way down. So hi, for those of you joining, I write like a serial killer 5-year-old, but we are going to be talking about some great TV this week, mostly season 3 and 4 of The Crown. Also, The Bachelorette. And yes, I stand by the fact that it's great TV right now. And then we're going to end with a little bit of teasers for Bridgerton. And by that, I mean Kate has done some extensive reading and research, and she's going to tell us all what to expect and what she hopes they change in Bridgerton, which is a show on Netflix, which is coming out on December 25th, Christmas Day. So, welcome. Let's get some suitable imagery up here. There we go. Let's try this. Okay, perfect. That's what I want to see. I want to see our faces, of course. It is what it is. And I also want to see Anne. So, she's our thumbnail for this week for good reason. Yes. We are both quite hard eyes for Princess Anne. And where we left you last week is Kate was already way ahead of me in marathoning The Crown. Even though I think I started it before you, my marathon game is just slacking. They say that that's the first thing to go with age. First you lose your marathon game, then you lose your memory, and then it's eyes from there. I don't know. But I am now on the finale of season 4. I have not finished season 4, but I just started episode 10 right before this. So that's where I'm at. And you are completed with season 4, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So we're basically we can talk about it the same way. You don't have to worry about finale spoilers, because despite what IRL Buckingham Palace says, this is literally not that fictional. It's a little bit fictional, but it's based on history.
Dramatizing.
Right.
They're just dramatizing the terribleness of certain Charles people, and it's really not that much of an exaggeration, which is why they're a little upset about it.
Well, you've got us off to a start there. Would it be fair to say our favorite character in season 3 and 4 is Anne, and our least favorite character in season 3 and 4 is Charles?
Yes. At least for me.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. But, okay, so tell me how the transition from season 1 and 2 to season 3 and 4 went for you. Was it hard to see new actors in these roles? Do you have any favorites where you're I prefer the older or younger one?
So, as well as I do think Olivia Colman is a fantastic actress. I think she did a really great job, but I think coming off of Claire Foy, she did kind of, because she doesn't quite embody the queen quite like Claire did. Because it's almost like Claire would have had the advantage of being young and her being able to age up so much and not be the like quietly dignified Elizabeth that she was. But she did decide to fully embody that kind of temperament, especially in season 2. When you get into like the season 3 and 4, she kind of takes. If you've ever watched Olivia Colman in like an interview or anything like that, she is very much the opposite of Queen Elizabeth. And there were some moments I'm like, I could feel Olivia push through. I'm like, it's still fine. It's still a great interpretation of who she is. It's great. But it's just like, she didn't fully commit to the sound, the accent, the walking like Elizabeth, which is sad. Philip, I like Matt Smith, but I actually like the new Philip better. Maybe just because they didn't write him so heinously. And then I liked, as much as I don't love Charles, I really think the guy that plays him does a fantastic job. Same with Anne. She is amazing at what she's doing. She's phenomenal. Like, heart, eyes, stars, kisses. I love her. And then everybody else did a pretty good job. Margaret Thatcher was a little off, but that's okay.
You didn't like the Gillian Anderson performance as Margaret Thatcher?
I think, to be honest, like, her mannerisms were fine, but I don't know what she was doing with her voice. It was to a level that it was a caricature, because then I was like, was her voice really that signature? And I wanted to know. So I watched the video of like Margaret, and I was like, I mean, she has a iconic voice, but it's not as grating as they made it in The Crown.
Okay, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but going into this, I genuinely had no idea what Margaret Thatcher's voice sounded like. I had done no preliminary research. So when I heard that, I just assumed, based on their commitment to setting accuracy, if not situational accuracy, I assumed that was really similar to her actual voice. Was it not?
I can see where she was trying to pull, but it's almost like she went too hard and was exaggerating it to a level that made it kind of comical even. She has that nasally timbre, but not like that.
I see we have a comment in the chat from Stormy Woods regarding this. And she says, it's interesting the royals didn't have these problems with the show until Diana's part. I guess they don't like reminders of how nasty Charles and his mistress Camilla are. I think that's a good point, because Kate, I think we mentioned this last week, but weren't there somewhat substantiated rumors that the Queen watched season 1 or something like that? The Buckingham Palace didn't take any stance against this, despite the fact that there's all kinds of controversial, things they're basically accusing the royal family of in season 1 and 2, until it got to the Charles, Camilla, and Diana part.
Well, and especially since, thinking back at the rage I had that they did Philip so dirty the first 2 seasons, and they made him worse than he was. It is kind of shocking. And I did read somewhere where there's no absolute confirmation, but it's well speculated that at least people in Buckingham Palace have watched it. And for them to only start commenting on it after season 4. Now, yeah, season 4, they did not hold any punches on how bad Charles was. But it's not like they hadn't portrayed certain people very poorly before. So it is interesting that they chose it now. I do wonder if it's mainly because it's still kind of in popular consciousness. It was before my time, but it's not before my parents' time. They saw it all happen. So there's plenty of people that would have been familiar with that and being brought up. Whereas any of the issues they addressed in the first 2 seasons, I'm guessing people in their 90s, it's not really their target audience. So, I guess it's the big difference. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's because there are different angles they could take the show, different angles the show could take on the royal family's involvement in everything that happened with Diana, not just the unhappy marriage and divorce, but also her eventual death. And I'm wondering if it's basically them saying it's one thing to accuse us of being, mean, racist, sexist, classist, etc., and starting and participating in wars and all that, but don't accuse us of murder of like one person. Like murder if it's like in a war outside of Britain, but like not murder this one particular person.
I don't know. Maybe part of it, I think, is just because of how beloved Diana was. Because even if it's the queen, and you're going to say like Philip treated her not the greatest the whole time in season 1 and 2, that's what they're asserting. Princess Diana was like, I mean, she was the thing during her time. I mean, she was the star that wasn't necessarily like a movie star, and I think she became like a media, even though she hated the media by the end, she was their kind of star. And so I can see where there's a certain level of unadulterated like, love that people can have for her, and especially her memory, that they might not exactly have for the queen.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, the emotion of it all is probably more elevated. So the vitriol of it all is probably more intense. I don't know, honestly, because to be perfectly honest, I felt like the last 2 seasons were far more accurate and far more enraging, but in a good way.
Yeah.
And yet I still don't understand how they didn't say anything for the first 2 seasons.
Right. They were asking for a fiction warning on this, but I mean, all of this predates me. I would have been, like a literal baby at the point that Princess Diana passed. So I don't really have like, memory of hearing about it in current media. I learned about all of this through, history. So I'm not intimately familiar with the fact that she was beloved. I only know that from, secondhand. However, I found myself kind of taken aback with how, and granted, again, I haven't watched the season 4 finale, so I'm not sure what all happens there. I assume that's when Charles and Diana announce their divorce, or when he announces he's divorcing her, or whatever. I haven't got quite there yet. But I was kind of surprised by how they portrayed her. Not like not quite an angel. Like they showed that she was a star and that she was loved, but she's definitely a multi-dimensional, flawed character this season. I found that interesting.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite episodes this season or season 4 was episode 2, the Balmoral tests, and obviously the amazing comparison between her and Margaret Thatcher. But if you were paying attention, she made it seem like she was a country girl all the way, like modern day Lizzie Bennet. Like that's what we were talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next, like the moment that she's engaged on, she tells everybody, especially like Camilla and things like that, she hates to live in the country and she only wants to live in London.
Mm-hmm.
And then they live separately. They live in 2 different places. He lives in the country with his gardens or whatever that was. And she lives in London with her lovers. And I mean, I knew about the lovers. I didn't know about some other things that shocked me. And even though they had warnings at the beginning of the episode, shocked me. And I was like, oh, didn't know that.
The eating disorder?
Yeah. I don't think I caught it the first time. I don't think I was paying enough attention to see the warning the first time. So that whole episode, which is pretty much just centered on her mental space, when she started doing that, I was like, oh no, this is not good.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I knew that she wasn't perfect or anything, but it did show a side of her that I had never contemplated as like her fighting to get in. Because I had known that she, by the end, was not, she had taken levers just as he had. I mean, he started it. Let's be honest. He started it, but I didn't realize that there was some level of it to be said that she had kind of always wanted some level of this in her life. I always would have assumed that she didn't because it is such a weighty responsibility. But maybe that's just because after her death, now everybody's more like aware of how much of a responsibility this truly is. And maybe that's also just my perspective on the whole thing is like, obviously that's a big responsibility. Why would you want to be in the public spotlight like that?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I thought it was very interesting how fleshed out the character they made her. She was like, I rooted for her. I wanted her, like, it made me hate Charles that much more, but it wasn't like she was a flawless character. She wasn't my favorite character. There were times that she was making a mistake, and at the time I'm like, no, stop. I mean, even the level of like when she does the dance in whatever episode that was,
Mm-hmm. To Uptown Girl.
Yeah, I honestly don't think she's that. She was more intelligent than that to not realize that that was the exact opposite thing that she should have done if she wanted to make Charles happy. So there is a level that it was showing her having more cunning than you would have ever heard or I had ever been told she had. So for them, I don't know if they're. It could even be that with the Buckingham Palace trying to say with this fiction, they might even be trying to say because I haven't read what they thought was not true. There is a
wanted the whole
I
season as fiction, like have some sort of fiction warning or something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was very interesting that they showed that aspect of her, and the whole time I was actually thinking about like, I wonder if William and Carrie have seen this season, because as much as like I was always wondering what if the Queen had watched the first two seasons, watching a woman who, to be honest, looks a lot like Diana play a very young and vulnerable and sometimes manipulative and sometimes very wrong version of their mother. I wonder what that would have been like. I don't know if they would have watched it or not.
Right. I think, okay, I'm going to be the villain for a second. And it's going to sound like I'm saying bad things about Diana, which is about as far villainous as I could possibly get. But just bear with me here, okay?
Mm-hmm.
From what the show, so I'm talking about the fictional Diana, not the real Diana. I am not sitting here trying to be a fact checker. So speaking only about fictional Diana as played by whatever her name is, they show her to, in general, be quite spotlight seeking, which I do not see as a bad quality in women. They show her believing she's like destined for some kind of greatness in what is, she was raised in a very classist society where there are these very distinct classes of people that are greater than others. And obviously that's the case in all countries, and you and I are in the States, and there's obviously all kinds of classism here, but it would have been a lot more open. They're saying the quiet parts out loud type of thing over there. So she had a little bit of, I think maybe today we'd refer to it as like a savior complex. And one of the things that I think it's Anne says in the show is that while Charles is beyond his years because he's been raised to be, since he was a child, he had to be, the near king or whatever. Awful.
Which I feel like should be disputed.
What now?
feel like that should be disputed though, because he is very immature.
Oh, I think he's incredibly immature, but in some ways, Anne at least believes him to be beyond his years, and Anne also says Diana is younger than her age, or is kind of this perpetual child, or was at that stage in her life. So again, we're just talking about the fictional character. For me, who tends to be a female apologist, if I were, however, trying to take the side of the crown and like defend the crown. So let's say I was like thinking in a PR mindset for real life Buckingham Palace. If I saw the fictional portrayal of Diana as it was in season 4, I would not be inclined to label the show as fiction, because if my goal is to get people to get her off a pedestal and have some sympathy for Charles and Camilla, I think this show does that more than real life did. Because when I read, like, just to kind of get a better understanding of all of this, because I wasn't super informed going into this about this whole like love triangle that wasn't, I immediately was just like, oh, you know, Charles and Camilla are terrible people. They used and abused Diana, blah, 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 which is absolutely true, it seems, in this fictional world and how they portray it. But they definitely portray it in a way where Diana does not look good, like a lot of the time, like does not look like somebody that someone would want to be married to a lot of the time. And I think the show tries to get you to, and this is maybe my most controversial opinion, so I'll stop here. I think the show does try to get you to empathize with Charles and Camilla a little bit.
So, in my so much, like, because it's finals week and I have so much time on my hands, why not watch? I watched all of season 4 this week. I then followed it up with a Princess Anne documentary because hard eyes. And then I watched a Diana documentary because I needed answers.
Yes. Is it the
and then I read
Diana
the
in Her
books.
Words Netflix documentary?
Yes. So, from those two things, so the whole thing about Anne in the show even kind of mentions how she felt a little jealous of like how in the media and how glorified Diana was without ever having to do anything. You watch the documentary, Anne has a little bit of a right to be jealous, but she also doesn't let it consume her and gets over it pretty quickly. I think that's an important like contrast that I really appreciate, because then I watched the Diana documentary, and it must be stated that the Diana in My Words documentary is literally in her words, so there is a lot of bias that needs to be acknowledged, yada, yada, yada. There was a level of, when I was watching this, kind of having to come to terms with how she described it. It was just 2 hours of listening to her saying like she was going through bulimia and she was crying and she was unhappy, which is a terrible way to live. But there was also an element, even in the story, in the documentary, of me going, when he was saying these things, he wasn't being the nicest person. He's not the greatest guy. Like, he was not handling the situation properly, but you were not helping him out. And you're blaming a lot of people for things that sometimes by this point wasn't their fault. And you're kind of villainizing everybody for not being the most bleeding-hearted person. And it was all these things that was kind of like, it wasn't necessarily villainizing herself or villainizing other people to an extent that I couldn't see either side, but it did kind of show, like, even when you listen to her in her own words, there's a level of almost woe is me in her explanation of what happened. And that feels awful to say because of how tragic her life did end up ending. But there was a level of woe is me. She married the prince. She became a duchess. She had a life of, like, as much as I said it's a lot of work and you're in an eye, you still have a lot of privilege as well. She had 2 children she absolutely adored. There was some happiness in her life, and she could only focus on the sadness. And she does talk about getting therapy, but I really am interested in I want to know more about how, if that was ever helpful for her, if she should have seeked more, if she should have been more honest with herself. Like, she was very unhappy, and it wasn't always Charles and Camilla. They did not help the matter, and I do understand why at the time they became very unpopular in public opinion, and they're still not the greatest.
Right.
But, and as much as I don't like Charles, because he did not handle it well, he sometimes it was very just, he was irrationally angry sometimes as well. There was a level of it that if she kept on spouting that she wanted the marriage to work, if she wanted to save the stuff, if she wanted to be better, whatever, there was a level of it that she should have acknowledged that she wasn't doing correctly. Yes, there was that whole sequence at the one point. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but she does try to just being with Charles and being like the quiet, idealized version of what they wanted her to be. But she really didn't commit to it for very long. And even still, there was the part that she was always still in the eye of the camera, and that honestly she needed a public eye by a lot for them to ever be able to reconcile, and she couldn't. And then it fell apart because neither of them could commit to trying for more than like a month.
Right. I think what was interesting is the place and time where I found myself hating Charles the most was when we first see him have lunch with the queen, in the episode where she has lunch with each of her 4 kids. And we see him have lunch with her, and Diana's pregnant. So Diana's upstairs and she doesn't, want to come down, and they're not happy, whatever. And he is just so painfully self-absorbed. Like, he is being a pompous, self-absorbed, this is about me and my feelings and blah, blah, blah. And the one thing that it made me think of is, so there's a book called Why Does He Do That? And it's about like systemic patterns of abuse exhibited by men. And it talks about the fact that, when we think about like stereotypes regarding guys and communicating their emotions, at least like, and again, I'll make this specific to the States, but I think that this is pretty like common in most first world countries, that guys don't talk about their emotions, or guys don't like talking about their feelings or whatever. And this book talks about how like guys literally do not shut up about their feelings. Guys do not stop talking about themselves. They put their emotions on a pedestal. If they have one bad feeling, it's the end of the world, and they'll lash out, they'll talk about it, whatever. But in this book, there's like this excerpt that I read where a therapist was talking about when she spoke to an abusive husband, and she was trying to get him to talk about just feelings in general. He could go on for, hour-long sessions on end talking about his feelings and what made him do that, but she could not get him to like talk about how it made his wife feel that he abused her, or how it made the kids feel, or whatever. Like, he would just immediately turn around and was like, well, like, I feel this, whatever. And that is like so clearly exhibited in Charles's self-absorption. Like, I did not get the person I want. And like, I'll acknowledge, like, he did not get the person he wanted. While the world may have been in love with Diana and she may have been a star or whatever, in this fictional universe, can't speak to the real Charles, but down with the monarchy and down with him too. In this fictional universe, he sees Diana as a spotlight seeking, power grabbing wannabe princess who is young enough to be his child, basically acts like a child all the time, does not share any interest with him. He doesn't find her funny. He doesn't find her fun to hang out with. They do not get along in terms of temperament. And he is in love with Camilla, who is somebody who is his own age, not over a decade younger than him, who makes him laugh, and they can talk for hours on it. So like, I get it. That's a like, sure, what a big hurt. Very sorry for you. Like, oh my goodness, you poor baby. Like, you didn't get to be with the, like, life is so hard for you. Wow. But he's turned that into like this huge, like, let me focus inside myself and not care about anybody else, which by the way is a really terrible characteristic in a king specifically. Like, that's a bad characteristic in anybody, right? But like, some people can get away with it. Like, if you work like a desk job and never interact with anybody ever and don't have like family relying on you for stability or whatever, you probably get away with that without like hurting too many people, right? But not if you're a king, right? Right. So I almost respect the fact that he doesn't love Diana, because I would almost be grossed out if he did, due to the age difference and power dynamic. What I don't love is how he handled this hurt. However, some of the characteristics he has in this sort of like self-absorbed woe is me, I think Diana may have absorbed, and she may have done it far less, and she may have done it far like less hurtfully than him. So like, I'm going to attack him, not her, obviously. But she seems to, through osmosis, absorb a little of his bad behavior.
Yeah, you make a good point there. Because I will say, like, as much as I think there was some, it's hard to say power grabbing, because I don't want to, like, because it sounds like I'm condemning what she was doing. I kind of respect what she was doing the first few episodes.
I admire an open power grab. It is fine. Like, especially in a fictional character, it's fine.
Yeah. But yeah, when the later you get in, they both have this reaction where it's like they have that you're making me feel, and they won't listen, and they won't identify how their actions are actually making their and the rest of them feel. And yeah, it's not the most warm and cuddly family, but you are also the royal family in the public spotlight that has, if you guys go under, it's going to have nation, or even to an extent worldwide ramifications. So they're both very high-tempered, and they both very reactionary to being even slightly upset. And I don't think they can either identify that, because she wants the attention, but I don't know if necessarily she wants the attention and gets the attention because she wants to hurt him. I think she just wants attention. And she can't identify that the more attention she gets, the more hurt he is. And he can't identify, or maybe he does and he just doesn't care, that the moment he mentions Camilla or anything about how he is wrong about his family, she represents what his family wants for him. And so him ever complaining about not getting exactly what he wants, or not being with Camilla, or even just having any frustration with how his family has treated him over the years, is a way of hurting her. And they both do it to each other so frequently that, I mean, neither of them is perfect in this marriage. Obviously, Charles is worse, and we will say that forever, but it's not, it was, I think that's why I flew more, is because neither of them were great, and in the fictional sense, and neither of them were great. Both of them were kind of awful a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see, and you haven't watched it yet, I don't think, but there's an episode or a scene with Anne basically telling Charles all of this. And it just made me go her eyes at Anne, because
I'm sure it's in the finale. I can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, she basically calls him a crybaby, and then he's like, "What? Like, I just came here to get some kindness. What is this? What?" Anyway, I have to do to get some kindness. And in my head, I'm like, dude, Anne, while she's being just like, no, she is being the kindest person to you that anybody's been in a long time. Because
Mm-hmm.
you are doing more self-harm by being this whiny little baby that anybody's doing to you. And her just being fully honest with you is the kind of thing that anybody has done in a long time.
Especially because, like, if you are at like his position, or just like, you know, some position where like a bunch of people have to kiss your ass, the nicest thing somebody can do is like be honest and show some tough love, because that's them being nice to you and giving you information, as opposed to just trying to elevate themselves by telling you whatever you, like, you want to hear, so you put them in how, you know, like, it's the whole like kissing ass is not actually being nice to the person, it's refusing to help them, essentially. Anyways, I love Anne is the moral of that story. I will say, the thing is, at the beginning of this, I said the show needed to give me a romance or die, which is not a unique threat. I tell all shows to give me a romance or die. And I will say, whether I like it or not, and it's kind of in the category of like, thanks, I hate it, but like, whether I like it or not, they did give me a romance. The Charles and Camilla thing, they believably sell them as very much hopelessly in love and willing to, you know, like, you talk about the whole, like, especially when you know, you think back to like the Arrow and Suits days, and we would talk about like, you know, oh, you know, this person would burn the world for the other person or whatever. This is quite literally them like burning the world for the other person. And if Charles and Camilla, although it's Charles' responsibility, not Camilla's responsibility, is to an extent kind of putting the country at risk, putting the government in instability, whatever, for the person that he cares about, which could result, you know, in like wars and like Vanessa Hudgens' voice, people dying or like whatever. It's not surprising that he would also cheat on his wife. Like, on the scale of like bad things to do, using somebody who wanted the position of princess, duchess, eventually queen, whatever, and wanted that life, and, you know, allowing her to, you know, take whatever other lovers she wants and have whatever she wants to an extent, and you want your mistress and whatever. I just think it's not the worst thing he's done, because I think he does a lot more terrible things. It's bad. It's bad. Like, it's not right, but he's been a lot more wrong. And also, I would stand by that if what I saw fictionally is true, which is that she knew he was in love with another woman before they got married. You know, when you see that she found out about the, like, what is it, like Fred and Gladys or something, like, what, these names, like, they give me a Charles and Camilla romance, but they make it as gross as possible. Okay, anyways, the like Fred and Gladys bracelet, whatever, they have her finding out about that and like knowing that he's still sleeping with another woman while engaged to her, and then she still marries him. And I'm like, I don't know about that one. Like, it's fool me once, but do you think that was that the case in real life? Do we know?
So she said that it was the case in the documentary. Now,
word. Okay.
I will have to back it up. Even before I watched it, I actually was already thinking about, she did show some urge to cancel the wedding in the show, in The Crown. I have to assume that by the time she found out and was fully convinced and was starting to consider maybe calling it off, was probably the point where it would have been very catastrophic immediately and guaranteeing catastrophic results in like the public eye. So I bet she was probably advised against doing so for that reason. I mean, I still think if she possibly could have, she should have, but there's also, because it was so big and it is like the royal wedding, more at play. But yeah, if she knew beforehand.
don't get me wrong. This is not on her. If she knew beforehand and
No.
willingly entered into the marriage, knowing that like he was in love with another woman and cheating on her, or like had openly had a mistress, whatever the situation was. If she knew and did that anyways, that's a power move and that's fine. And that's what she wanted. But then she knew she was entering a marriage where there wasn't love for her. You know what I mean? And I get that she was young and like,
Yeah.
God, like she's making this just like she was like a literal baby, like whatever. But
Younger than me, which just freaks me out.
right? Like,
Ugh.
and I feel like I got married as a baby and like she got married younger than me. You know what I mean? So like, that said, like I don't think I would have ever like, I know like never say never, and I'm fortunate to have never been in that position. But like I can't imagine marrying somebody who I know is cheating on me, right? But she was marrying the future king of England, and we know that she was in like it was a goal of hers to like essentially marry royal and get into all of that. So if she's kind of going into this eyes open, I don't know. That was another part that like almost made me feel God, like it sounds like blasphemous just to say I'm talking about the fictional characters. I'm talking about the fictional characters. It
Yes.
almost made me feel a teeny bit bad for Camilla.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of blasphemy that we have to like kind of go through to explain the complexities of that love triangle on the show, it just feels blasphemous because
Yes.
even though neither of us really lived through it, we're both just like, but we know, like,
Right.
uh,
I feel
yeah.
like I feel like terrible for even, and I see it as fictional and it's how the show's portraying it, and I don't know what happened in real life, whatever. And like I'm, you know, in real like I feel like I shouldn't have to put this disclaimer, but like in real life, I'm against bad things. You know, like in real life, I'm against like going to war, cheating on your partner, being like self-absorbed and abusive and like whatever, just like in general. But in fiction, if it fits within an entertaining story, I will tolerate it. That's why I feel really, really terrible saying this, but like one of the most entertaining characters in season 4 for me was Margaret Thatcher. And I know she's like terrible, may she rest not in peace, like all of that. But like I really, really enjoyed her as a character. She was that like perfect, like gray area. And I know she's supposed to be like fully villain, whatever, but like gray area, dark gray, okay, area that was like so entertaining to me. In fact, was it with you that I was talking about like that scale of like female villains and how you have like your perfect middle anti-heroes, and we have a good number of anti-heroes, and we have a lot of like heroines, and then we have a lot of like flawed heroines that are like between anti-heroines and heroines, and then you have all the way to villains. And I was looking for more characters that are between anti-heroines and villains, and I feel like Margaret Thatcher falls really nicely in there for me. So like maybe that's why, you know, with some of these women that were supposed to be watching this hating, like I know like public opinion was like, we hate Camilla probably more than public opinion hated Charles, which is sad and sexist. And I think public opinion generally hates Margaret Thatcher, but I'm not totally sure if that's true or whether that's just people that I follow on Twitter.
I don't.
I
think that was just. I think that was actually just the IRA was really I hate Margaret Thatcher.
Really? Okay.
I could be wrong about that. I'm not sure. She's one of the. She's on my list of women in history to read about, but I haven't reached her there yet, so I don't really know. But yeah, as far as I know, there were some like mixed feelings in England, of course, but most people that really truly hated her, even to this day, is like the IRA, so the Irish.
Okay. And I'm sure there's like a lot of good reasons to like hate the real life Margaret Thatcher or whatever. If people do, what I don't know. But in terms of this fictional season, it really delivered for me women that were within that like villainy anti-heroine gray space. Excuse me. And I really enjoyed it. I'm not team Camilla or whatever, if that's even a thing, which I'm sure it's not. And I'm certainly not team Margaret Thatcher, but they entertained me. And I'm curious to see how they portray at least Camilla going forward in the next 2 seasons.
Yeah, I will say there's a strong possibility that if they left out that scene with Camilla and Diana having dinner, and Camilla obviously knowing that she is just emotionally abusing Diana, if they had left that scene out, I really would have felt for Camilla a whole lot more, because basically the royal family told her to get married to this guy, and then she did, and she still was in love with Charles, and like that's rough. But then she has to go and manipulate Diana that hard at a very obviously young and vulnerable age. Like, no matter what has already been said about Diana, that was also wrong. Mm-hmm. But I think if they had left that out, we definitely all would have gone, Camilla really isn't that bad.
Right. Did that happen in real life? Did she try to lord it over Diana,
so
that she
the documentary
knew Charles
said
better?
Something about, yeah, the documentary said something about like them going to like have lunch one time and Camilla saying things, but it wasn't as clear as she would just say things about Charles, and it made it clear to Diana that she knew more. That was how it was kind of phrased. It wasn't as clear as like a direct attack that the Crown made it, because the Crown made it a very clear and direct attack against Diana. Okay. Like, it was obvious Camilla knew what she was doing in the show.
Okay. Because if it was her trying to like, and I'm fictionalizing here, if it was her trying to like warn Diana that there were like feelings there, and if there's a lot of noise you're hearing, it's because my cat is basically climbing directly on my mic right now, like more or less right on top of it. Thank you, Bishop. Very cool. If there is, I'm going to try to get him to come in front of the camera. We'll see. If that was if it was intentional, it could be her trying to warn Diana that Charles was in love with another woman, in case it's very important to Diana to be in a marriage with love. If it is important to her to be in a marriage with love, she can only appreciate someone being honest with her about the fact that that's not what she's entering. And what I got from the show was that she knew full well that she was entering a marriage where she was not the object of his affection. So I can only assume she's okay with that. Zero Judgment, the fictional version of her.
Yeah. I can appreciate that, but I still think about that scene, and it was very clear how uncomfortable Diana was, because I think at that point she still probably believed, if I remember correctly, she still believed that Charles in some capacity loved her.
Mm-hmm. And she was a child.
She was a child. She probably still thought, like, even if she's still in love with Camilla, like, eventually, because I will be his wife, and like he does love me, just maybe not the same quite yet, because I am still a child. Because she did recognize that she was so young. She had recognized that.
Right.
I don't know. I just know that without necessarily knowing exactly how Diana felt, it was very clear that what Camilla was saying was upsetting her. Mm-hmm. And Camilla did show herself to be pretty intelligent and very rational thinking. So my judgment would probably be that she knew what she was doing. Whether she understood exactly the full scope of exactly how Diana felt about having a loveless marriage or anything like that, I don't know. But there was a level of manipulation there that was kind of not great.
Right.
I mean, for storytelling purposes, awesome. It was interesting, but
I was out on the edge of my seat during that scene. Fantastically.
Yeah, like I was engaged, but mm-hmm. I just, it's like, if we were going to start to try to defend Camilla anyway, that really, really took a big bite of that chip out, because for all the faults of every other character, she wasn't in the show as much, so she didn't have it, and she only talked to Charles, and there's just so much hatred towards Charles. Like, it's hard to develop a love for somebody else.
Right.
And so
It's hard to love somebody who loves Charles. Like, what do you see in him? What's wrong with you? You know?
I think she was almost, we'll see. I mean, like, I get that Josh O'Connell or whatever his name is much cuter than Charles. I get it. He although he did play Mr. Elton in Emma, which was another creepy character, but he did it in a very humorous way, so it's fine. Yeah, that casting, for as accurate as it is, like, he does look like Charles. It's also like, but no, he doesn't. He's way too cute to be Charles. He's adorable.
The thing is, and I would have to go check their ages, but I also don't think they have the age difference between what's the name of the chick that plays Diana, like Emma Cornwall or something like that.
Emma Corrin.
Emma Corrin.
Yeah, Emma Corrin. And that's the other thing, is by the end of season 4, they were all still looking like at the oldest, late 20s.
Right.
And I'm like, no, Charles would be in his mid to late 40s by this point, I think.
Right. And he didn't look good.
So,
like, let's be really, really clear. Even I didn't think he looked good when he, like, I've looked at the younger pictures of them. I don't think he looked good young, but he definitely did not look good old. I'm so sorry.
So yeah, by the time we were getting to 1990, he was looking rough. And for them to still have Josh look just as cute as a button as he did when he was did the Prince of Wales speech, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And
I think they had to have him believably look attractive enough for, like, two smart, beautiful, whatever women to both be somewhat into him. Even though I don't really think Diana was that into him by that point, but whatever.
No. Well, and also with Emma Corrin, she's very young, like the first few episodes, really well with Diana. And I think her voice and her mannerisms were great throughout the whole thing. But by the end, so there's a scene in the last episode that you're going to see that there was a level of it that she just looked way too young to be playing Diana at this point. Because I knew, like, by this point, I had seen pictures of what Diana would have looked like at this point, and it was just like she had grown up so much in the span of what season 4 would have been. And so she still looks like her 18, 20-year-old self. And I'm like, no, you're almost 30, and you still look like you're out of high school.
Mm-hmm. I think Emma is 25 or something, but
yeah,
that's why it'll be nice to have Diana aged up for season 5 with Elizabeth Debicki.
Yes. I don't know
in the chat, but
like,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, other than like the more senior members, Diana, I don't know who else is going to be in the new one.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. So I'm looking in the chat. Stormy says Charles could have done what his great uncle did and abdicate if he truly wanted Camilla more than the power of the crown. If that had happened, it would have been Andrew as king. Whole other problem. Very good point. And she adds, one of the most horrible things about season 4 was the family members shoved into a care facility so as not to bring shame to that horrific family. These were 5 to 10 human beings. I quite agree. That episode really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And it was really one of the moments where I stopped just saying, oh, I don't like Charles, or I don't like Philip, or I don't like whatever. But after that, it was like, no, I really just dislike the entire royal family. Like, down with the monarchy. This should not be a situation. We do not need family inheritance. Like, first of all, I'm not British. So, like, this is me commenting on a fictional thing, whatever. Like, those who have British citizenship can do whatever they want with their own government. Oh, no, wait, they can't because it's a monarchy. They don't have a say in that. But in general, you know, they can do their own, like, revolution and whatever situation that they need. But I personally think that default inherited power, especially absolute power to that level, is incredibly corrupt and unethical, and that episode captures it perfectly.
Yeah. And I watched that, and it none of the episodes have ever made me like. There's only two moments that have ever made me feel like almost sick in watching this show. Like I was uncomfortable. One was the bulimia, like the first time the bulimia hit because I wasn't expecting it. The second time was when they fully revealed that. I watched other period dramas where that's fully fictionalized family dynamic, and it's been in there, and it was almost easier to stomach because I knew it was a thing that had happened, but at least these true people were fiction. Whereas when you make it, yes, it's a fictionalized version of the family, it's still based on fact. And I was like, oh, that's gross. And it does raise the question of like, well, who knew and all that stuff. But I can't look at the Queen Mother who knew and didn't do anything and not go, how did you? I mean, I understand her explanation in a way. I understand where she's coming from, and that's how you're raised, and that's how you're taught to think about all these things. But yet again, but in contrast, Margaret fully identified this is wrong. Why are we doing this? So it was just heart-wrenching to watch that.
And I think, and I know I'm going to sound like incredibly American right now or whatever, but that makes me really, I guess, placing that in the season where they did, in contrast to what was going on with Charles as one of the main plot lines and his love life being one of the main plot lines of the season. And, you know, people for one reason or another, love or otherwise, wanting to marry into the royal family, seeing that dirty underbelly of them just absolutely on a pin, you know, turning on the most vulnerable people, turning on the best people, and, you know, killing them or making their lives miserable. It kind of makes it difficult to really care for any character. It obviously makes it difficult to care for the royal family, because I don't, but it also makes it difficult to care for any family that cares for them or wants to be a part of them. So Diana and Camilla, for example, I can kind of turn my blinders on and try to, you know, enjoy this romantic scene or that or whatever. But I can't really admire, you know, people that think that that kind of family is something to aspire to. So that was different from a fictional standpoint. From a fictional standpoint, that was difficult. But then, you know, from a fictional standpoint, I can also like turn on my blinders and say like, oh no, I'm going to like Diana for this, that, or the other, and not pay attention to the fact that, you know, she actively wanted to be a part of the royal family and did what she had to be, you know, whatever. But anyways, there's that.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to watch the finale tonight, and even more so, I'm really excited about seasons 5 and 6. I know we speculated a little bit last week about what would be in it, and we are at time at 9 o'clock, and I still want to shove about 30 to 60 seconds in of The Bachelorette, so I won't get into season 5 and 6 speculation. But next week, however, is when we're going to discuss Bridgertons. The Bridgertons. We discussed this, right? It was going to be
Bridgerton.
Right. We're going to discuss it in more detail, but can you first give us a little bit of a teaser? Can you give us a spoiler, having read 2 of the books now at this point, of what you're most excited to see captured in season 1 of Bridgerton?
So if they're gonna go through each book and do each season, I have to wait for season 2 because book 2 is way better.
Is it?
Yeah. There is definitely the tropey themes of Jane Austen without the level of questioning people's intentions and societal like commentary. It's not that deep, and there is steamy stuff that, to be honest, I was like, well, but blushing while making my lunch listening to this audiobook. And I was like, well, okay then. All right, here we go. And there's so proud in the early 2000s. And while that was recent, some of the things may not have been quite as obviously wrong to some people that was in this book, that the first one, that is just, I hope they change. But I do think that it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very dramatic. There's a whole part about how there's this lady, this ominous old lady that writes these gossip columns, who in the show Julie Andrews is going to play. And so it sounds kind of like in the beginning of each episode, this would be my guess, is much like how a lot of other Shonda shows go, they're going to have a voiceover with this lady, kind of giving you a little sneak peek, a little glimpse at what's going to happen this episode, and then you have to watch to find out, and then she might end it too. Mm-hmm. And she's basically kind of pumps a lot of the story along while not actually being part of the story. You just read what she writes.
Mm-hmm. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about Julie Andrews. I'm excited about the setting, the whole thing. And I really hope that they understand that I'm fully serious when I say, sell me a romance or die. We shall see.
I mean, it was romantic.
Awesome.
But, ooh.
That's what I want to hear. Speaking of romance, and I know we're a little over time, I just wanted to give you a quick update on The Bachelorette. Because I know, you were really waiting with bated breath to hear about this, and it wasn't just me.
Yes.
But you may recall last week, I said that I really wanted Bennett and Noah to be sent home. Those are the two guys causing the most unnecessary and unentertaining drama. And I have to take that back just a little bit. And I don't like admitting that I'm wrong. I was a little bit wrong because you see, one of them is entertaining me now. He's still not a good person. You see him on screen. It's Bennett. You may recall him from last week where he was basically cosplaying as Clark Kent, which is just what he wears all the time. So this week, the episode opened with her resolving the drama with the two of them, wherein she sent Bennett, aka Superman, home, and then I think she kept Noah. I forget, he's so forgettable. Plus he's like 25 years old, so he's basically a baby to me, a grandma, right? So I proceed to immediately ignore Noah because without this drama, he didn't previously have a shtick, he wasn't interesting, and he also wasn't interesting in this drama. So I was like, send them both home, but I'll take one out of two. So Bennett goes home. Bennett first we have a polygraph test. So she and all the guys sit down to take a polygraph test. God, one of the most brilliant ideas on this show. Please polygraph them all the time. Anyways. So they're asking the guys pretty basic questions. Some of it is very obviously, in my opinion, staged so that some of their secrets can come out of what's your name? Just to establish a baseline, close up of this guy sweating and he says his name and they're like, that was a lie. And it was he had been lying about his name. So there's some things that they obviously knew they were gonna have something. I kid you not. This guy straight up, I mean, he had a tragic backstory reason for why he was, but they were trying to ask them all their names, to establish a baseline. We're down to 7 people. He's not new. And then he was fully lying about his whole name, which is fine. If I went on a show like that, you'd have to have a gun to my head to get me to use my government name either. That's so embarrassing, but whatever. Anyways, so they have Tayshia take the polygraph test as a see, I'm opening up too thing. And she's truthful on all of them. But one of the questions they said, do you regret sending anybody home? Dun, dun, dun. And she says, yes. And then doesn't explain who. And we're all who? And obviously the most recent one that she sent home was Superman, Bennett. And then they cut to one of the guys just straight up with his whole chest being it's Bennett. And so we're okay, maybe she regrets sending Superman home. Whatever, I did not find him appealing at all. I get that physically, he looks super. So textbook, he is supposed to be an attractive male specimen. I understand. I'm not blind, but emotionally and the way he his whole personality was this whole holier than thou, smarter than thou type of thing when he also wasn't smart to back it up. So it's I don't know about this one. So I was happy that she cut him, but they were like speculating that he was the one that she regrets. I was like, there's plenty of other like attractive guys she sent home if that's what you're about, I guess. Anyways, he sneaks in, like dead ass sneaks in to her house, or like right out, like he sneaks into her yard. They're like on a resort. Like he gets back into the compound at the end of the episode. Bennett gets back onto the show. Like he's been like taken away in a limo, whatever. He gets back and was like, I want to talk to you again. I'm in love with you. And so she's considering bringing him back on the show, and the episode ends there. And I'm like, I take it back. Superman, you can come right back. Still don't like you, but you're entertaining me now. Like, you can stay and entertain me some more. That's what you missed on The Bachelorette.
Yay. I'm so glad I know this now.
I'm so glad you two, too. They're going to do, they aren't calling it hometowns, but they're doing like meet the family or whatever, which is probably going to be like a family Zoom call. So I can't wait for what hometown dates look like in the era of Corona. I'm sure it'll be god awful. All right. Well,
it has to be awkward.
Yeah, it sounds terrible. Imagine having to do that, but then like for 7 different guys' families. I can't imagine anything worse. Anyways, thank you for staying 8 minutes overtime with me. We will chat more about all of this same time, same place next week.